This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese President Xi Jinping reaffirms his country's commitment to reform and opening up as the China International Import Expo kicks off. African businesses expect to seal deals after exhibitions at the China International Import Expo. And South Sudan's Riek Machar agrees to a meeting in Kampala to save a peace deal with President Salva Kiir. This is CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program. Optimism is high that China and the United States will reach a trade agreement. And in sport, Erasmus factor inspires South Africa's third Rugby World Cup success as the Boks return home. We start in China, where President Xi Jinping has reaffirmed his country's commitment to reform and opening up. He said China would continue to eliminate trade barriers and promote multilateral cooperation. He was speaking at the opening ceremony of the second China International Import Expo. CGTN's Shu Yun has more from Shanghai.
Building a shared future in the new era. While addressing the CIIE's opening ceremony, President Xi Jinping said that China has made great progress in expanding imports to promote consumption and reducing trade barriers as part of the nation's efforts to further open up its market. He also expressed strong opposition to protectionism and unilateralism, calling for countries to jointly build a world economy of openness and cooperation.
The challenges that the global economy faces cannot be tackled by a single country alone. Countries should uphold the concept of putting humanity first and should not let their own interests override that of the mankind. We must have a more open mindset and take steps to work together to make the global market even bigger. We need to strengthen the mechanisms for sharing globally and explore new ways of international cooperation. We should put more focus on globalization and remove obstructions as much as we can.
Since the first CIIE, numerous concrete measures have been carried out in areas like widening foreign access, improving China's business environment, and increasing service imports. Those have not only reinforced global confidence in the Chinese market, but also earned the expo itself a good reputation. And this time, President Xi put forward 3 proposals for economic globalization, including jointly building an open and cooperative world economy, jointly building an open and innovative world economy, and jointly building an open and sharing world economy. Moreover, China will also adopt 5 measures to promote high-level opening up in areas such as opening up its market and improving its business environment.
中国将不断完善 市场化、法治化、国际化的营商环境。
China will continue improving the country's business environment, making it more international and market legislation oriented. We will expand market access for foreign investment and continue reducing the negative list. We should also improve the investment promotion and protection mechanisms and information report system.
He also called on countries to strengthen protection of intellectual property rights and oppose knowledge blockades to avoid creating or even widening technological divides. The world has become increasingly aware about the huge consumption potential in the Chinese market, and that is why this Import Expo is seen as a golden opportunity for companies not only here in China, but also around the world to tap into the shared benefits and also prosperity. So Yun, CGTN, Shanghai.
Well, let's cross over to Shanghai now, and I'm joined by our CGTN correspondent Yang Chengxi in Shanghai with the latest. Chengxi, what is the latest from the expo?
Well, I want to start by talking about some reactions from government and business leaders towards President Xi Jinping's speech this morning. It was welcomed by audiences because he talked extensively about the key issues that many are concerned about, whether it is promoting free trade, cooperating with less developed countries, or improving business environments in China. Now, earlier, I've interviewed several participants here who shared their views on these key points.
China has actually opened up their doors to the developing world, especially we those from Africa, and we are very appreciative. Currently, as we speak, the Ghana economy and Chinese economy are playing very large and big roles together. We have managed to do business over the years, eating into close to about $3 billion. We hope to do more.
Well, we have seen a long track record of gradual improvements in the socio-economic environment. Over the last few years, the Chinese government has put a lot of emphasis on environmental standards. That's good for us. We represent, if you like, American farmers. American farmers have a real need for access to Asian markets and China in particular.
Domestic companies are also very inspired by President Xi's speech about market openness. It will foster a more positive atmosphere for our interactions with international companies, industries, and organizations.
We really, I would say, I welcomed the standing behind and further opening up of the market and really driving China as an available market. And of course, China is a big market, but maybe more importantly, it's also a market for innovation.
We perceive the environment as very supportive. The automotive industry in China is still growing very fast, and we think it's a hotspot of the mobility of the future. We think that these areas are getting more and more open for investments, for IP, but also for future technologies.
Now, carrying last year's tradition, there are 5 parallel sessions under the Hongqiao International Economic Forum this afternoon here. Now, with the overall theme of opening up and innovation for win-win cooperation. Now, these sessions will cover issues such as enhancing business environments, artificial intelligence, WTO reform and free trade agreements, e-commerce, and last but not least, the grand topic of building a community with a shared future for mankind. Leaders have explored consensus among international community for an open world economy as well as common development. Now, this year, companies from 55 African countries have joined the second CIIE. Now, for example, Rwandan company Gashora Farm will showcase their chili pepper products this year with 3 distinct flavors. Now, that's after it secured a $2 million deal last year here at the first CIIE. Now, in fact, the Rwanda Development Board signed a memorandum of understanding with China's e-commerce firm Alibaba last year after the first import fair to promote more of the country's products into China. Now, also expected to hit the exhibition shelf are honey products from Zambia. Today you can even find them on major e-commerce sites in China. Now, these are just a few examples of what we can expect here. The import fair's officials said as a way to encourage more African countries to go across continents to join the expo, China has provided tariff and quota-free treatments to 95% of import products from some of the least developed nations in Africa. At the same time, they will receive supportive policies on exhibition fees. Back to you.
Yang Jiangxi joining us there from Shanghai. Thank you. Now, after the expo opening ceremony, French President Emmanuel Macron accompanied President Xi Jinping for a visit to the French pavilion. There, the two leaders tasted specially prepared food paired with wine. President Macron called for China to open its market to French agricultural products, following on the footsteps of a Monday announcement in which Macron said the European Union and China had reached a deal on the protection of food and alcohol products.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world. all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
To South Sudan now, where opposition leader Riek Machar has confirmed he will meet President Salva Kiir on Thursday. They are expected to meet in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, over the stalled process to form a unity government before a November 12th deadline. A spokesperson for Riek Machar, Manawa Peter Gatkut, said the meeting will also be attended by the head of Sudan's transitional government, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The host and President Yoweri Museveni will also be in attendance. However, President Kiir's spokesman, Atenywe Kateny, said there is no official confirmation of the president's participation. With a week to go before the deadline on November the 12th, the rift between Salva Kiir and Riek Machar is widening. Well, let's bring you more on these developments now. CGTN's Patrick Oyet is following developments from South Sudan's capital, Juba, for us. And in Kampala, CGTN's Isabel Nakiria. Patrick, let's start off with you first, because has Salva Kiir's administration given any further comments on whether the president will be at the Kampala meeting? It seems that it is not clear.
Yes, Beatrice, the talk is on here. Of course, everyone is talking about this peace process, and of course, there have been issues, even though officially they have not come out to state that the president is going to travel to Uganda for this meeting. The information is already out. The fact that the spokesperson of President Salva Kiir is saying they do not have still official invitation, but they are ready to go. If called upon means they will go. And also the presidential advisor on security affairs, who is actually coordinating issues of this peace process, is in Khartoum. Yesterday evening he met with opposition leader Riek Machar. So if the Riek Machar side is saying there will be a meeting on Thursday, we are sure here that the meeting will be there. Many are hopeful that this meeting goes on, because the situation the country is at now is that we are at a stalemate, and people are saying any agreement that the two leaders will reach is better than having no agreement and being in the current situation. So yes, there is.
Well, let's go to Isabel, though, in Kampala. Isabel, what's the word from Kampala on this meeting itself? Is it confirmed?
Yes, Beatrice, it's confirmed. I just spoke to the presidency, the press secretary to the presidency some minutes back, and he said that the meeting is confirmed. He did not, though, say which day the meeting is going to be, and he also did not relay the details of the meeting. But considering that President Museveni has been a peacemaker in the past, we do think that the meeting will involve convincing the two leaders, President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, to come to the table and put their differences aside. We also think that President Museveni will also try to seek commitment from these two leaders. He has been on record in the past few weeks when he was in South Sudan, when he told African leaders to stop wasting time on war and, of course, fight for peace. And we think that because South Sudan has sunk deep in war for the last 5 or so years, and many people, especially the ordinary people, have suffered. There's been a lot of running around, and Uganda has felt the biggest pinch, considering that many of the refugees have been running to Uganda, over 1 million refugees here, and South Sudanese, most of them. President Museveni, we think, is going to try to salvage the situation and try to put these two leaders on table, to put their differences aside.
All right, Patrick, let me return to you very briefly on this, though, because the region is becoming rather impatient on that need to find a peaceful solution in South Sudan. Now, there was a warning of sanctions against the Salva Kiir administration if this transitional arrangement is not finalized by the deadline on November the 12th. Any reaction from the government there on this threat, and is there any hope of this deadline of November 12th being met at all?
Yes, there is reaction. Actually, we've talked to the Minister of Agriculture in this country, and he is actually saying this threat of sanction is bad for the country. And he is also saying that the problem with the international community is that they are giving a blanket kind of sanction. He's saying the government of Salva Kiir is not to blame in this case, because the government of Salva Kiir is ready to form the government. It is actually the opposition which is not ready to form the government. So any sanction, any punishment that should be given shouldn't come to the government. It should go to those who are actually opposed to formation of the government. But now, the opposition group are also saying that, you know, they have reasons as to why they do not want the government to be formed now. So yes, there is reaction, and they are saying if any sanction, any punishment comes, it will be unfair to the government of Salva Kiir.
All right, Isabel, Uganda and South Sudan are at the center of attempts to make this work. Has Kampala said anything about what would happen if the peace process is not finalized by November the 12th? As you did indicate earlier, President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda is very keen to find, as a mediator, find a solution to South Sudan's unity issue.
The Office of the Presidency is very tight-lipped on the details of what may come out after the two leaders fail to make peace, because this is a very complicated situation. We know that the international community and the regional leaders both are eyeing South Sudan very keenly, and there is pressure mounting to see that these two leaders come to the table and form a coalition government. But on the other side, the International Crisis Group has warned today that once this coalition is made without the disputes that were aired out by Riek Machar being first, resolved, this may sink the young nation into war again. And of course, we've seen from the past that countries like Uganda did jump in 2013 when war broke out to send troops there. We are not sure whether Uganda can do that again once the country slides back into war, because this is a very complicated situation, and we are watching closely on what may come out.
Isabel Nakiria joining us there from Kampala, and Patrick Oyet in Juba. To you both, thank you. French pharmaceutical giant Sanofi has slashed its price of a key tuberculosis drug, rifampicin, by 2/3. The cut followed negotiations with the United Nations. The cheaper version will be available in 100 of the world's poorest nations. It will be introduced in South Africa in 2020. South Africa is one of the countries with a high burden of tuberculosis. CGTN's Lisan Jamel has more.
TB alone here in South Africa kills more people annually than HIV and AIDS, and in combination, the two diseases are lethal. It's a worrying situation for health officials, the South African government, and organizations like the South African National Tuberculosis Association have worked tirelessly to combat TB, but the disease persists. TB is one of the top 10 causes of death worldwide, and this is in spite of the fact that the disease is actually curable. People with damaged immune systems, such as those living with HIV, are at much greater risk of becoming ill with TB. But there's new hope. A relatively new two-drug combo could change the fortunes of those with TB in a few months. This life-saving drug has, until now, been completely unaffordable in developing countries, and the South African government will roll out the drug from next year. Good news for TB survivors like Lily Mufokeng. Mufokeng lost her hearing permanently after enduring more than a year of toxic treatment with older drugs to ensure that she was cured. She had also defaulted on her treatment a number of times.
I've been infected in TB for 1 year, and then I started to drink my tablets 2 months ago. And it's useful just because of I have to drink it 6 months. I go back to work just because where I work, they know my situation and they know how I am, and they've even got problem about what I have.
The key TB drug helps shield the person who has TB infection from developing the disease, but also from passing it on to others. It will also improve the adherence of taking the drug for patients like Lili Mofokeng because it is taken for a shorter period, with 1 dose a week and has fewer side effects than the current treatment. The drug is also cost-effective, reducing the economic burden of TB control efforts. Yudisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
This is CGTN. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. The UN begins relief efforts in Somalia as floods displace hundreds of thousands. And India plans a rationing of cars to reduce emissions in New Delhi as the air pollution worsens.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The UN has launched relief efforts for flood victims in Somalia. The humanitarian agency has begun delivering vital food packages and supplies to thousands of displaced people. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa has more.
Somalia has been grappling with heavy flooding that has so far killed at least 10 people and displaced more than 270,000 others. According to the United Nations, the heavy rains have further destroyed infrastructure and livelihoods in the Horn of Africa nation. The humanitarian agency's intervention is a glimmer of hope, as the much-needed aid has only just begun trickling in.
It's a step forward. The World Food Programme has informed us that food distribution will continue as they endeavor to reach all affected villages. They have started the distribution from Sel Jalel and will reach other areas such as Budwain, Howaldag, Hawatako and beyond. We appreciate the efforts of WFP.
I have received assistance in the form of foodstuffs that include flour and rice. I have my rations here. I am very thankful to Allah.
The situation remains dire as schools in hard-hit areas have been forced to shut their doors. The country's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo has reiterated the government's support to the victims.
We came here to express our sympathies to those affected by the recurrent floods. We know that last year's floods were the worst on record, but this year, the floods may eclipse what we experienced last year. For those affected by the floods, may Allah grant mercy to those who have perished and the displaced.
Eastern Africa has been experiencing heavy rainfall and flooding since July, forcing families from their homes. Experts are now warning that adequate measures need to be put in place as the region braces for more downpours. Bulkisa Nyabwa, CGTN.
Meanwhile, Malawi has not been spared from the early impacts of climate change. Rising temperatures and changing rain patterns are already affecting the southern African nation, particularly the agricultural sector. The government is now advocating for climate-smart practices to increase yields and improve resilience through bamboo farming. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy brings us more in this report.
The bamboo might seem an unlikely crop to mitigate climate change, but farmers in Malawi are showing how integrating bamboo with other sustainable farming techniques is reducing emissions. Malawian government has taken the lead by encouraging farmers to plant more bamboo trees, a move aimed at restoring degraded lands and forests. Malawi has committed to restore approximately 4.5 million hectares of degraded land, almost half its total land area by 2030.
The challenge in Malawi is huge. I think it is because of development and also lack of awareness. People want to cut trees, and usually it's because they want to burn bricks. So they burn bricks using trees, and they don't want to replant after cutting.
The world's fastest growing plant, bamboo, is said to have the potential to make a major contribution to reducing carbon emissions.
We're encouraging people to start bamboo farming. The bamboo farming will be used for construction of their houses and also to be used as charcoal. We're implementing national strategy for 15 years, and we're beginning with 3 years as the pilot phase. And at this phase is where we want to start bamboo farming.
Uncontrolled clear-cutting of native trees for fuel has caused Malawi to lose nearly 10% of its forest cover. Available records indicate that in the last 36 years alone, Malawi has experienced 8 major droughts affecting millions of people. If properly applied, the bamboo is expected to help Malawi achieve the much-needed sustainable development goals. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Lilongwe, Malawi.
India's Delhi NCR region is choking. The alarming levels of air pollution have led to public health emergency declarations. Schools have been shut down and citizens have been advised to stay indoors. Breathing the highly polluted air is causing difficulty for elderly and children. The state government has taken steps to deal with the severe air quality. Our correspondent Ravinder Bawa brings you the latest.
It's the first day of car rationing in Delhi. The odd and even scheme has kicked in for 10 days. This scheme allows private vehicles with registration numbers ending with an odd digit to ply on roads on odd dates and those with an even digit on even dates. It's an attempt to combat the deadly pollution choking the capital. But will this controlling of vehicular pollution really make a difference to the air quality that remains in severe plus category?
These are the emergency measures. So there is absolutely, no repercussion that you can say that will make a huge impact on our AQI. It's not going to do that. It's 10 days or 15 days of odd even. Yes, if you were taking a permanent decision of making it odd even and not worrying about your votes, then it could be different.
A thick blanket of smog engulfs the city with air quality index peaking to a 3-year high. A public health emergency is declared as the toxic air will have adverse health impacts on all, particularly children. Schools are closed till Tuesday. Construction activity has been banned till 5th of November. The grey cover is mainly constituted of smoke from stubble burning in adjoining states.
We can't decrease the stubble burning smoke today because it has already spread, but we can at least decrease the sources of pollution within the city. Leave Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Punjab and others. We have to cut vehicular pollution in our Delhi for ourselves and our children. If we follow odd even for the next 10 days, then Delhi's own source would be slashed. There would be at least some relief.
This toxic air is causing sore throat, watery eyes and choking people.
Patients who have chronic respiratory ailments like asthma, COPD, smokers and heart disease patients. What basically happens, it exacerbates the symptoms of asthma, bronchitis, which can lead to infections, in turn leading to heart failure, respiratory failure, which also leads to more emergency visits. The medication need increases.
Protests demanding urgency to tackle the pollution have begun in the city. Concerned parents are taking onto the streets as this pollution is costing them their children's lives. Ravinder Bawa, CGTN, Delhi.
Well, CGTN's Ravinder is in the thick of things in New Delhi. She's joining me now live from there. Ravinder, the levels of pollution there are causing major concern. Construction activity has been halted. Schools have been closed. How is the situation today?
Well, today there is some good news for people living in Delhi because since last night the wind speed has increased and because of that the smog has been blown away to a certain extent. The severe plus category has now come down to very poor category, but even though air quality index still remains much above normal, if the normal is around say 60 to 100, it is much more than that. It is 360, 370 in certain parts of Delhi. So still we do have toxic air all around, but definitely because of the increase of winds, things have changed, and as the Met Department says that by tomorrow, that is Wednesday, we might have some rain because there is western disturbance in the western parts of this country, and that will bring in some rain which will actually wash away some pollution to some extent. But of course we'll have to depend on the rain gods in the next few days to give us some relief. But in the past 1 week, Delhi has really suffered. Actually, it's reaching to 999, the air quality index, which was quite high. In fact, before this, whenever we would talk to any of the CGTN channels from here in India, it was so difficult to stand outside for half an hour even, because immediately our eyes would start burning. But today it's much better. Beatrice.
Well, Ravinda, there is a plan to ration cars allowed into Delhi. Describe to us how this is expected to work exactly.
Well, it's already been implemented since yesterday, that is 4th of November. What it really means, it's a car rationing plan where odd and even vehicles will be allowed to ply. Like vehicles with odd registration number can ply on odd dates, and similarly vehicles with even registration numbers can ply on these roads on even days. Although there are some exemptions, women are exempted from this, women who have children are exempted from this. During the school going time, the private vehicles carrying school children are exempted, two-wheelers are exempted. So certain categories are exempted, although there is a fine of about 4,000 rupees, which has been doubled this time. So if anybody is found violating this scheme, there will be fine, and fines are happening. Yesterday itself, there were around 300 people who were fined. So that is this is how it is being implemented. It just keeps a number of vehicles off the road, as the government of Delhi did speak about it. They said the first day was successful, as 1.5 million vehicles were off the road yesterday when it was implemented, yesterday being Monday. So that this is one part of the scheme, but it is very important what kind of arrangements the government makes to implement it, because if the people are inconvenienced, then it will not be effective enough and people would come out in protest. So what the government has done, they have got 2,000 more buses to increase the public transport. The Delhi Metro Rail Corporation has increased the number of trips. Even the private car aggregators have actually said that they are going to not indulge in any surge pricing, so it will be normal pricing. So these kind of steps are being taken in order to increase the capacity and efficiency of the public transport system. Government office timings have been staggered. So all these steps are being taken in order to make this scheme a successful scheme. Beatrice.
Right, Ravinda Bawa joining us there from Delhi. Thank you for your update. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Optimism is high that China and the US will reach a trade agreement. And the Trump administration formally notifies the United Nations of its withdrawal from the Paris Agreement on climate change.
Tourism is very powerful, and it can open many doors and eradicate a lot of social ills that we face today in our society if it is used very wisely. Feni Cultural Tour has made it part of their priority to be able to work together with the community. Wherever we go with the tourists, the community is also benefiting. Our tourists are looking for an authentic Namibian experience, and the township offers that experience.
You know, sometimes when you do the tour...
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Hundreds of businesses from across Africa are currently at the China International Import Expo in Shanghai. From Cote d'Ivoire, the Fatou Silla Foundation will be showcasing traditional art and handicraft. Here's CGTN's Daniela Pearson with more.
The Fatou Silla Foundation has been promoting handicrafts from Cote d'Ivoire and West Africa for the past decade. The founder, Fatou Silla herself, now well into her 80s, sees it as a finishing school for artists.
Young people who are not in school or who are looking for retraining can come here to the foundation to learn the arts. Those who have partial knowledge in pottery, cabinet making, tapestry, etc. can also come to perfect their training here.
With new or more refined skills, these crafters can attract a higher price for their creations. The foundation collaborates with more than 40 artisans, helping them to find a way to make a decent living from the fruits of their labor.
Previously, I did not know pottery and had never seen clay. She took us as her children and trained us.
Here in Africa, it's usually the tourists who buy our artworks. We are grateful to Mama Fatou because it's because of her that we can sell out our art.
Through the foundation, the artisans also have the chance to participate in international exhibitions such as the China International Import Expo.
Here in Africa, many people are not interested in art. So to sell art objects, you have to go out of the continent. In China, for example, African art is a discovery for the Chinese. They do not know it, but they appreciate it and buy it.
With a mission to promote Ivorian heritage around the world, the foundation hopes to one day open an African arts museum in China. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Chinese ambassador to the United States, Shui Tianka, says he believes Beijing and Washington will reach a trade agreement. He was speaking at a conference on U.S.-China economic relations. CGTN's Wang Guan reports.
After nearly 2 years and 13 rounds of high-level consultations, Beijing and Washington once again say they're close to a deal. Despite the 24-hour news cycle and shifting headlines coming out of Washington, China's top diplomat to the U.S. believes the two sides will pull it off this time around.
I believe that we will be able to make a mutually beneficial deal as long as we both show sincerity and reach out to each other on the basis of equality and mutual benefit.
The Chinese ambassador made the remarks at the Haras's China meeting, a conference that has been called the World Economic Forum for Emerging Markets. Cui Tiankai also used the occasion to reject statements by hawkish Washington strategists who favor the decoupling of U.S.-China relations.
This is neither rational nor realistic, because to decouple from China is to decouple from opportunities. It is to decouple from a hopeful and developing world.
Echoing the Chinese ambassador were two Republican governors from so-called red states that voted for President Donald Trump in 2016. They said the tariff war has hit local farmers hard, and they want U.S.-China economic relations to be restored sooner rather than later.
This tariff dispute that we've had has dramatically impacted South Dakota. So we're seeing as a state and with their incomes, less market opportunities, lower prices. Our farmers aren't cash flowing quite as well and struggling, and would love to finalize an agreement with China and get it across the finish line.
The state of Nebraska is about half of all the U.S. beef that is going to China. What we'd like to see is just a consistent growing marketplace to have opportunities for our farmers and ranchers to be able to sell our agricultural goods.
Bringing together around 300 participants from U.S. and Chinese business and government communities was Frank Jürgen Richter, a former director of the Swiss-based World Economic Forum. Haras's is a think tank also based in Switzerland.
They all hope, that we will overcome these issues. The reason they are all here is to meet their American counterparts, to engage in joint ventures, in joint investments, in technology exchange. Despite all these issues, I think business is going on, on a company-to-company level.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump were supposed to announce a deal at the leaders' meeting of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, better known as APEC, in San Diego, Chile, but Chile canceled the meeting. Despite the cancellation, statements from Beijing and Washington suggest the two sides are still aiming for a November signing. The White House said over the weekend that the U.S. and Chinese negotiators have made enormous progress towards finalizing a Phase 1 agreement, although the deal was not yet 100% complete. Wang Guan, CGTN, Las Vegas.
Well, the Trump administration says it has formally notified the United Nations that it will withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Agreement. The move is part of a broader strategy by President Trump to reduce red tape on American industries. But it comes at a time when scientists and many world governments are urging a rapid action to avoid the worst impacts of global warming. CGTN's Jim Spellman has more from Washington.
The U.S. has begun the year-long process of formally withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement.
The deal calls for countries to voluntarily reduce carbon emissions. Early in his presidency, Donald Trump announced the U.S. would pull out, calling the agreement a bad deal for the U.S. and claiming it would put the American economy at an unfair disadvantage.
The Paris Accord would have been shutting down American producers with excessive regulatory restrictions like you would not believe, while allowing foreign producers to pollute with impunity. They were allowed to do what they were doing.
The Paris Agreement was negotiated in 2015 and took effect the following year. Chinese President Xi Jinping and then U.S. President Barack Obama led efforts to bring nearly every country in the world into the agreement. The U.S. withdrawal comes as a new wave of environmental activism is taking root. 16-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg spoke at a rally in California over the weekend.
Right now, we are living in the beginning of a climate and ecological breakdown. And we cannot continue to look away from this crisis anymore.
Thunberg and other activists want the U.S. to drastically cut carbon emissions. But President Trump has pushed back on environmental regulations, targeting everything from high-efficiency light bulbs to auto emissions. The Green Climate Fund is a UN program that helps developing countries cope with climate change. During the Obama administration, the U.S. was the biggest contributor. This year, the U.S. contributed nothing.
If the United States were to decide to re-engage at any moment, they will be more than welcome. The United States have provided $1 billion to the Green Climate Fund during the last period. And so it's the fact that the United States did not contribute to this pledging conference doesn't mean that they will not in the future.
The U.S. won't formally be out of the Paris Climate Agreement until the day after next year's presidential election. If anyone besides Donald Trump is elected president, the U.S. can rejoin the deal in 30 days. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok says his country is discussing scenarios such as cash transfers for poor people to accompany planned subsidies for food and other basic goods. Shortages of bread, fuel and medicine coupled with hefty price rises brought people out in protest and led to the toppling of longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir in April. The economy has remained in turmoil as politicians negotiated a 3-year power-sharing deal between the military and civilians. President Bashir's government ran up enormous budget deficits by subsidizing fuel, bread and other products. There are no details over Hamdok's proposal as yet, but the plan includes subsidies for drugs, medicine, medical services and education. The Ministry of Industry in Tunisia has spelled out priorities for the development of its aeronautics sector. This follows the findings of a recent study on the sector. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi has more.
Tunisia aims to develop an integrated aeronautic industry by increasing the volume of production, recruitment and services. Experts expect a rise in the number of jobs by 2030, as well as exports that are due to reach $1,375 million with an added value of 37%.
The aeronautics sector is a strategic industrial sector to Tunisia. It employs more than 17,000 technicians, skilled workers and engineers. It represents 5% of gross domestic product. Developing this vital sector is a national priority.
Industrial enterprises took part in the study entitled State and Prospects of Development of the Aeronautic Sector in Tunisia by taking into account the benchmarking in Eastern Europe, Asia, Latin America and Morocco.
We're increasing the number of subcontracting enterprises in electric, electronic and mechanical services and engineering sectors, in addition to seeking to increase the production's capacities to remain competitive.
Aeronautic specialists urge the state to support the private sector in developing the added value of the products, as well as in the engineering services and studies, so as to generate more jobs, improve the turnover and boost exports.
The goal is to improve the positioning of Tunisia in foreign markets and to attract foreign investments and industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing.
The manufacturing industries represent 17% of the GDP, 90% of the Tunisian exports, and 20% of jobs. According to the Minister of Industry, the government is promoting an operational and marketing strategy allowing Tunisia to be considered as an innovative, attractive industrial hub with proven Tunisian skills in the aeronautic field. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The Nigerian government says it plans to regulate the use of social media across the country in a bid to curb hate speech and fake news. The spread of false information is considered to be a threat to the country's unity. CGTN's Phil Ihaza has more on that story.
Mr. Steve is a Nigerian comedian who makes jokes out of serious political issues and posts the videos to his many followers online. Now, he says he's concerned about a government decision to control the use of social media in the country.
My issue with the government trying to regulate what we do on social media is, how do you differentiate between a hate speech and a joke?
The Nigeria Communication Commissions in 2018 said over 100 million Nigerians have access to the internet and social media. The government says the move to clamp down on social media is designed to tackle fake news and divisive comments that can destabilize the country. But social media activists say there hasn't been enough discussion with government to create a coherent approach.
When you don't provide information to citizens and you don't provide an avenue for feedback mechanism between government and the people, then people will come up with fake news and say things that you're not doing. If I'm in government today, I would not wait for citizens to ask me for information. I will put out all this information there.
Experts also say the government should be collaborating with other bodies to tackle hate news and fake news on social media platforms.
Social media is a tool, and it's a tool that you can use positively or you use negatively. So that's why our religious institution, our academic space, our government, various government institutions, have a role to play. And also our family system, where we inculcate values and ensure that we hold people to account when they go the negative path.
The government has pledged to set up a committee that will propose ways of governing social media.
The bill will have to go through the National Assembly before it becomes law. For now, Nigerians will have to wait and see how this will pan out. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. An innovative radio program helps Burkina Faso's displaced children access education.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, through radio, displaced children in Burkina Faso are getting access to education. One particular radio program is helping children displaced by armed conflict in Burkina Faso continue their education. Students can play back recorded lessons over the radio at home.
Children in a town in northeastern Burkina Faso are taking part in a pilot UN program to learn from radio recordings. 14-year-old Husseini, whose name has been changed to protect his identity, is one of thousands displaced by violence in the Sahel region. Last year, militants destroyed his school.
We were in class when we heard the explosions, gunshot, and I got scared. We were screaming and running. Teachers came and there was shooting.
The UN Children's Agency says close to 2 million students are losing out on their education in the Sahel region due to violence and insecurity. Through the radio education program, displaced children are given facilitators to help them with their lessons. The UN is also working on other alternative learning opportunities, including community learning centers.
A film screening in Tunisia has some unusual attendees. Inmates got to view 2 films as part of an initiative by the Carthage International Film Festival. The annual festival is held in Tunis and recognizes Arab and African filmmakers. More than 6,000 inmates in Tunisia and Egypt took part in the program. Organizers hope the screenings will improve access to cultural material within prisons. The World Organization Against Torture also took part in the organizing of the screenings.
One of the most important goals for the Carthage Film Days in prisons is to reintegrate prisoners. Because for us, it is important to think about the prisoners behind bars and also think about them for when they get released. We do not interact with them only when they are serving their sentences, but we also do so when they are part of society.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. The Erasmus factor inspires South Africa's 3rd Rugby World Cup success as the Boks return home.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
The 2019 World Rugby Coach of the Year, Rassie Erasmus, has been described by